All right, so we are live now. Welcome everybody to this discussion. So today I have a special guest who is an amazing author. I recently found out, and that
Thanks.
is Joao F Silva, who is the author of Seeds of War, which is book one of the Smoke Smiths series. That's it. Unfortunately, I don't have the hard copy or the physical copy yet. I will definitely get it. I just have the ARC copy that you sent to me. So first of all, I would like to congratulate you on writing such a beautiful, amazing book. This is my first ARC ever. I have a very small channel, as you know, so I I have never read an ARC book, or even if I was offered, I was not able to accept it at that time because of other read-alongs, etc. So this is an amazing thing that's happening to me also. um, and I recently posted a review of the book. So if any of you have not watched it, please go and check it out on my channel. Um, and First question to you, Joa. So before we get into the book as such, do you want to do a general introduction about you, apart from your writing, what you do, etc., etc.?
Yeah, I can do a quick one. Hi everyone. I'm Joao F Silva. I am originally from Portugal, but now I'm based in the UK. And I wrote Seeds of War. It's my debut novel, and it's not the first book I ever wrote, but it's the first book I ever published. I've got a few non-published and non-publishable books in the trunk that I just haven't really finished or haven't really gotten to publishing over the years. But yeah, I'm quite excited about getting Seeds of War in front of everyone. And yeah, in terms of what else do I do besides writing, like I'm a climate researcher. I do a lot of research on climate and energy, and uh, that's something that doesn't really translate into my books that much because I kind of like to keep it separate. But yeah, so like it's essentially something I will maybe at some point explore in terms of potential future books in terms of climate fiction and things. But for now, I'm mostly focused on fantasy, and yeah, Seeds of War is the debut.
Wow, that's interesting. So I strongly believe that somehow climate can also figure into fantasy books, right? Especially if it is dark and grim dark, considering where we are all headed, right?
Yeah.
So coming to the book. So I have several questions, but I mean, those are like, I didn't get a chance to collect it from my viewers yet, but these are all my personal questions then. So I would like to start with, um, I had a question in mind. Oh, okay. So I was reading through the book. It was good. It was sounding it felt like a very uh, good um, attempt at fantasy until the attack on the Herald happened, right? That came out of nowhere. I wasn't expecting, and that's what hooked me into this book. And it was kind of traumatizing because of how her kids, her two children, also took part, and I didn't see that coming. And I'm like, okay, these are two innocent kids. I did have a doubt when she mentioned, okay, they're completely harmless, right? She says that, Gimlor. And I was like, should I be careful about it? And I was getting strange vibes. And I think that's when the whole vibe of the book changed for me and I was completely hooked in, right? And then there was no going back. I was like, I need to finish this book as soon as possible, right? To know what's happening. And it gets interesting and interesting. And I'm just not saying this, to sugarcoat or to get on your good side or anything. But I was really, yeah, we will get to those parts later on. Other things that really, impressed me. But I think that's the part where I really got hooked into, right? So for you, while you were writing that uh, uh, scene, right? Did you have any apprehension of including the kids? Because I think they are kind of small kids, right? Into this scene, and of course, they are in this brutal world. They are trained to survive in the brutal world. But what made you? How did that scene come about?
So I think it's, do I have any regrets? Probably not. I think
Yeah.
I quite like the way it turned out, and I'm actually very glad that's when you found like you were hooked by the book, because to me that scene is kind of like the mood setter or like the tone setter for the story. I think
Mm,
um, when people see that, they kind of know what to expect and what the tone of the book can be. Like I'm not really shying away from having characters doing bad things, or like characters who are supposed to be relatively good people, or at least in the beginning they're presented as relatively, morally normal people. It turns out that
mm,
they can get nasty very quickly.
mhm,
And I think it's good for the reader to have that uh, knowledge from the get-go, from the beginning. And if they
mhm,
don't like that, if they don't like how the children are portrayed in that scene, I think it's
mm,
probably a good time for them to not continue with the read. And I'm perfectly
mm,
fine with that. It's like if that scene bothers people, then
mm,
they might not be the right reader. Like the book might not be right for them, because I will have scenes that are very, like action heavy, or scenes that
mm,
kind of go a bit more into the psychological trauma that some of the characters have experienced. And I think those, for me, those scenes are a little bit harder to deal with and to grasp as a reader. So like if someone who's very how do I say it? If someone is very bothered by children being involved in violence, even though they're the perpetrators of the violence,
mhm,
then I think the book is really not for them. So I think
mhm.
yeah.
I think that's where it differs from other books. Usually, we see children in these scenes as the victims, but here it's kind of the other way around, and it might unsettle some people. It did, but it did, the same thing to me as well. I also felt a little bit unsettling, but it was in more of an intriguing way. Okay, so this is how, if it's this is going to be the first half of the book, so what's going to be in the second half? Like, now it makes sense. It's kind of a tone setter, actually, the whole scene.
Yeah.
Mm,
And the thing is, like,
when you
for
talk,
me, like,
yeah,
oh, sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
no, 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 go ahead.
No, I was just saying that for me, it's like the reason why the kids were not the victims is because I don't think, um, in a world that's so cruel and so unforgiving as the world that Seeds of War takes place in,
Mhm,
I really don't think it would be, kids would be trained to fend for themselves since they were born, essentially. And at times when they grow up, they become even harder than their parents were, because their parents were also survivors in a way. So like they're basically become survivors since they were born, essentially. So, and also I didn't really want to portray um, a traditional family. So like the
mhm,
Gimlor is a mother, but she's not the most caring and loving mother, which is something I also kind of wanted to avoid. Is
mhm,
I wanted her to be a mom in her own right, but at the same time, she has other stuff going on. She's not defined solely by the fact that she's a mother, and
mhm, mhm,
I mean, she cares about the children, but she's not a tiger mom. She's not, nurturing them and like going after them all the time and telling them, don't do this, you should do this instead. She kind of lets them do their thing.
mhm.
And at times she experiences things that I think all parents experience at some point, which is like the frustration that raising young children can bring. Yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned nasty characters. So, for the viewers who are, here who have not read the books, there are three main POVs, three characters. So the first one is whom we were talking about, which is Gimlor. She is kind of an ex-mercenary, or no, maybe she was basically kind of a warrior, right? She was a warrior, and now she wants to settle down and also build this community of maybe renegades and ex petty criminals, maybe. So that's what she is. And the second character is Orberesis, who is this? very, very despicable character, and he was also a petty thief, right? Con man kind of a person, and he becomes this godlike figure, or maybe God himself. He promotes himself as a god. And then you have the third character, very interesting. I didn't see where this third character was going. Red now, who is also called the blood collector. I didn't know where his story was figuring out, in the whole plot line initially, because yeah, of course he is a mercenary, he is being hired, but why his POV, right? But later on we figure out why his POV is interesting. So that was also a really intriguing part of the story for me. So talking about nasty characters, all these three characters, they are not your typical cliched characters that you see, right? They might have some redeemable characters qualities, but you don't know whom to root for at this point in time. Sometimes you feel like that. For me, Grimlor is still my favorite character. Um, so right now we're talking about nasty characters. So what do you want to talk about Orberesis? How did he come about? And because it's a very bold move to have his POV there, because he is really really evil, I feel, and selfish.
Yeah, he's. I thought it was interesting how I've read a lot of books about uh, they're not necessarily about religion, but where religion plays a very important role in the story.
Hmm.
But a lot of the times in fantasy books, it's more about what the religion is saying. It's more about what are the teachings of the religion, and about like how people can be devout about, no, we have to do it this way because the religion says so. We have to do it that way. We have to fight these people because the religion says so. But I was mostly interested in the personal side of religion, like who comes up with these religions, and who becomes these prophets, and like who are the people who kickstart all of this. And
Hmm.
I mean, I'm not a religious person, so I hope it's not offensive for people who are religious. But I think a lot of the times in fantasy books, religion has is related to magic. So there's this idea of like, okay, someone is magical, therefore they're kind of like a demigod, or some
Hmm.
sort of deity in a way. And I wanted him to be not really a god, but like a fake god. I wanted him to be
Hmm.
not really a prophet, but like a fake prophet.
Hmm.
And I thought it would be interesting to figure out how someone like that would come to power, and how someone like that would stay in power, because sometimes that's the more difficult thing to do. And you can conquer, you can do all the nasty things you want to do in the first place, but how do you survive? How do you navigate? And I was also interested in finding out what would a character like that have as a motivation to do all of that, because
Hmm.
it's a stressful endeavor. Like, he's not a good
Yeah.
character. But he goes through a lot of stressful and situations that could very easily put him in the grave. So why would someone risk conning every single person in the world, pretending that he is a god, if he knows
Hmm.
the consequences? So like, why would he risk that? And so that's where I started playing about with his motivation and for doing things. And I think the reason why he does it, I do think it's fairly realistic and kind of relatable to some people. And I think that's probably the most redeeming thing that he has about him, is like, I think some people can relate to the reason why he's doing all of this stuff, is because he's not a healthy individual. He has some issues, like, without going into spoilers, like, he does have some things going on, and he thinks that by conning everybody, that he has access to resources that he wouldn't have otherwise, and he
Hmm.
needs the con to be successful. And he's playing the long game. He's been trying to do this for a long time. But I mean, to me, I think that's what makes him interesting as a character, is that he's not just some he is fairly evil and very selfish and manipulative, but at the same time, he also has redeemable things about him, and you can sort of still kind of understand why he's doing what he's doing and the
Mm.
motivations.
Yeah, I mean, because he keeps reminiscing that nobody was kind to him, and when he was suffering or when he was child, right? So you do get that understanding that where he's coming from and why he's acting the way he is, but unforgivable sometimes. Because I too, like, one thing I really hate is god men, right? God men and God women. So that I got him as it's very rare that I found in a book somebody like this who is so openly, like, he is admitting to himself, okay, I don't have any power. He knows that, and then all these inner monologues. So it makes me hate him more because he is transparent about what he is doing to us, right? So, but he's my most for me, he was the most interesting character. My favorite character was Gimlord. And with Red now, as this plot progressed and reached towards the end, I don't know how to feel about him. But without giving much spoiler, I think he might have been chosen for whatever happens later on, uh, for the principles that he follows. Maybe he is the strict mercenary, right? And he has his principles, and he is maybe somebody who is trustworthy or something. Because I cannot figure out Red now much. Would you like to elaborate a little bit about Red now, his intentions, whatever you can reveal at this point in time?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think for me, he's like the sleeper character. I think when in the first half of the book, when the readers are reading the book, they can kind of picture, or at least what they think was going to be the end of the book.
Mm-hmm.
But figuring out Red now, I think, is the hardest part, and I think it only becomes clear in the second half of the book what his role will be, in the second half of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think, like you said, I think he is fairly hard to figure out as a character because for me, um, just the same way that I was interested in exploring the motivations for Arboresis to do what he does, I wanted Red now to be someone who's so tired and so like done with everything and everyone. He just wants to retire. He's not even the unwilling hero. That's a trope. I don't consider him an unwilling hero. I think he just kind of he keeps doing what he's always been doing because he feels like he just has to do it because he would feel guilty if he just leaves all the people that depend on him. Um, he made promises to his sister who's dead, and he just kind of wants to keep the promises, and he doesn't really have much left, except what he left behind in terms of the people that he cares about. So I think he's just concerned that if he walks away from his way of life, which is a very hardcore military mercenary life, that very isolated because the group that he founded, they're not very well known. Like people know them, but they
Mm-hmm.
don't know much about them. They know they just show up and they fight and then they leave. Um, and I think for him, it's kind of the case of how do you call it quits? How do you finish what you
Mm-hmm.
started in life? Like,
Right.
do you get to have peace in life? Like, if the world is so brutal and so dark and so, if how do you get to have peace when everybody that depends on you is still asking for
Mm-hmm.
help and they don't want you to go, they don't want you to retire, and at the same time you have people who are that you loved that ask you, no, you have to retire, you have to go, and you deserve some peace finally, like go get what you deserve. So he has this moral compass that he's not really sure what to do with. And like, on one hand, he really wants to retire to honor his promise, but at the same time, he has people that still need him, and he doesn't want to give up on the. Doesn't want to really want to give up on his mercenary life unless he knows for a fact that the people that he's leaving there are in good hands. So he kind
Right.
of wants to do it as a last mission to figure out, okay, if this is the last mission, then um, I'll figure out something, and someone will come up as the next leader, and I'll happily hand over my reins to them, and they'll do something with the group.
Hmm.
but obviously as the book goes along, his story gets a little bit more
Right,
complicated,
right.
and he doesn't really get to go to the path that you would like to go through. And I really
Yeah.
don't want to say much more than that based on
Of
spoilers.
course not. Yeah. so, so these three characters, right? They are not your typical fantasy heroes, right? When it comes to, usually we see this very young and maybe sometimes even teenagers, right? They are pulled into this destiny they are supposed to fulfill, those kind of things. But here, like you said, they are atypical, very different from each other, at the same time unique also, and not at all what we see in normally in fantasy. So you have Redna, who is going to be a retiree very soon. Then you have this Gimlor. She is like a, I don't know, like she is a mother at the
Middle-aged
same time.
single mother, yeah.
Yeah, right. And she also wants a retired kind of a life where she is doing her thing and not being a warrior anymore. And then you have Arboresis, but maybe Arboresis is a character you might see as villains in fantasy books, but it's tough to get the POVs of these characters, right, as main characters. So I think that's what, for me personally, I think that's what makes this book interesting. These characters being so atypical, and there are things that happens. We will come to the magic system also, but there are things that comes to myths and magic of this book that I didn't see coming at all. Right? I I'm a huge reader. My favorite genres are fantasy and mystery thrillers, psychological mystery thrillers. So I usually consume my mysteries on my audiobook and read the fantasy on physical books. That's what I do. So I love it when it's a good mystery, when there is a good reveal and jaw-dropping reveal, etc. And I I like it when it happens when I'm not expecting it, right? But in mystery books, I'm expecting it, and if it doesn't happen, I'm disappointed. But in fantasy books, it doesn't matter if it doesn't happen because I'm not going expecting a mystery. But in several part of the story, you get that, and especially with what happens to. Okay, I will not name anybody because again it will be a spoiler. I don't want to spoil your book for potential readers. So, but mystery surrounding the there is a, for viewers who have not read, again, there is this whole um conflict that is going on between in this realm of seats of war. There is political intrigue as well, and excuse me. Then there is this magic system that's going on with the smokesmiths, and you also get references to this overarching mystery about the conflict between mother nature and father time and how it all ties in together to the ongoing event right now, right? And when that happened, and when some aspect of some characters that was revealed towards the second half, end of the second half, um, I was like, oh my God, I can't. It's like almost 20% left in the book, and I don't think any more information will be revealed. How long should I wait for book two? Because I want this, because those are the things that interest me, like, these kind of mysteries of the world. And when that revelation happened, that's the most important, most delicious part of the books for me in general. For example, I was just reading the Shadow Rising, fourth book of the Wheel of Time, and there is so much revelation in that book, especially towards the middle of the book, about the Aiel culture and the Aiel world and Rand's ancestry. I don't know if you've read Wheel of Time. So
I've
for
read the
me,
first five. Yeah.
okay. So for me, that was the most interesting part of the book series till now, because all these revelations and history, and the myths of the world, when those are revealed, and I'm just telling you that that was my favorite part, and I'm hoping more of it will come in book number 2 and 3 and in future books. Um, so my question to you is, how? vast and deep is this world and its myths? Can we see more of it coming in the future series? Or is it like, I remember J.K. Rowling saying that, she has so much of material with her even now, which we will never get to see because she has built that world that elaborate. And many authors do that. They have this elaborate world build and they have the material for them. We will never get to see in any of the books. But how much of your world can we see in the future? Is it going to be just a trilogy, or do we see short stories and things like that more coming?
I'm counting on it being a lot more than just the trilogy. So like to be honest, I'm not even sure if the series will end in a trilogy because I
Oh,
have
okay.
three books planned out. So I have Seeds of War, I have the book two, which I'm working on, and I have at least some ideas for book three, but it really depends on how book three ends up being. There could be the
Mm,
case that I think there's still a lot more story to tell than that needs to continue, and I might come up with books four, five, and six, or something like that. It's like at this point, it's really hard for me to say. What I can tell you is that I'll definitely be writing more prequels and more spin-off novels, like
wow.
all in the world, because I feel like Seeds of War really only really scratches the surface of what this world is and can be. And I think I'm also writing a prequel novella for Seeds of War, and that's going to kind of be more about the events that took place thousands of years before the events of Seeds of War. But it's really kind of, in a way, it's for readers to have a better idea of what they can expect later on in the series, while at the
Mm,
same time um, getting an idea for like things like the lore and the myths of the world and like kind of why some of these stories came to be and things like that. So
mm,
I'm really looking forward to writing in this world for so many years. Like I'm really like not done with this world. I think I've encountered authors who write a trilogy and they're like, "Oh, I'm so done with this world. Like I just want to write something different." And for me, it's like
mm,
maybe things will change, but right now, like I really want to write way more books in in this world. I think
mm,
the magic system and is still a lot more things that need to be kind of discovered by the readers. Like they've only seen a small aspect of what the magic system can be
mm,
with Seeds of War. And to be honest, the if you look at the map of the world, like there's only really three main locations that take place in Seeds of War. So, or maybe four if you count another one. But the map is much more vast than that. So I actually have a
mm.
lot of things planned for other parts of the world in later books. Um, so yeah, just to answer your question, I'm really looking forward to writing a lot more stuff in this world, like a lot more.
That's so exciting to know, especially if those books are going to be anything like Seeds of War. I'm sure we all will read it because I was like, now you're talking about magic systems, so I want to ask you about uh, um, how you came about that because using smoke, I mean, we have heard, elements and metals and things like that being used as you know, equipments or instruments to use magic. But smoke was something kind of
Yeah.
different. Were you inspired by any real life, real life habits, or is it just something that you chose out of, yeah, you had a list of stuff and then you decided something like
Yeah,
that?
it was actually not. I wasn't even thinking about the real life parallels with smoking tobacco and other substances, but it was more about like I really like magic systems in general. Like I mean
Hmm.
I do like the kind of like the grittier side of fantasy, but like I'm also kind of a sucker for like good magic systems and like really kind of
Mm,
hard ones with concrete rules that you really understand. And I really like the Powder Mage trilogy from Brian McClellan.
yeah.
It has so I that's one of my inspirations for it, and I would really also like the Mistborn,
Hmm.
the way that the ingest the metals. But I've always found that the way they ingest the metals doesn't seem very realistic to me because it's like you ingest it
Mm,
in a drink and then your body just immediately absorbs it immediately, and I'm like, how does that work? If you eat
hmm.
food, it takes at least 30 minutes for something to kick in. So it's like I knew that whenever I'm building a magic system, I wanted something that has like immediate effect,
Mhm.
something that, if you flare up your lungs with smoke, your lungs will feel it immediately. Like it's going to spread through your entire body. It's going to be immediate effect. So I wanted something that was immediate and is something that is also damaging for the user, because I am writing kind of like darker books. So like it can't just be a magic system that functions as a plot shield for the characters. Oh, like I'm just going to use the magic now and I'm going to get out of my problems.
Mm.
I
Mhm.
wanted something that was more almost worse. Like the effects are worse than the benefits.
Mm.
It's like people have to be very cautious when they use the magic system, and not everyone can use the magic system. It's something that's rare, something that's not super common, and something that's dangerous and has a lot of serious consequences to the user.
Mm.
So um, I, I guess the way, like the way I came up with it, I was listening to this heavy rock band that I really like called The Sword, and I was listening to one of their albums called Warp Riders, and something one of the lyrics, I forgot which song it was. One of the lyrics was saying something about sacred smoke. And at the time when I was listening to the song, I was coming up with ideas for magic systems. And I was like, that's it.
Mm.
Smoke-based
Yeah.
magic system. And it really immediately clicked with me, and I started kind of like developing it. I have an Excel spreadsheet where I kind of play around with ideas and, okay, what can
Mm.
this do and what can't they do, and what kind of herbs can they burn, and do they get different powers from different herbs, like things like that.
Mm.
um, and yeah, that's how it came about. It was actually I actually recycled this magic system from another story that I never ended up finishing. um,
Okay.
and actually from two different stories. I had originally had this idea for one story that I don't think it was a good story, that's why I didn't finish
Mhm.
it, and then I recycled it into another novel which didn't finish either. But I really liked this magic system. I thought, for people who like magic systems, this is something that I think people would like. So, and I think it fits really well with the world of Seeds of War. I think it's in a gritty world. I think it makes a lot of sense to have a magic system that's just as gritty and just as kind of scary
Mm.
for the users. Yeah.
Right. So that's another thing, right? You just cannot use it because there are consequences of it. So you use it when it's really needed. So that's the question because Brett now is also able to use this magic, right? He is also a smokesmith, and what's fascinating is that it's not the same power each smokesmith has, right? Like because each person has this individual version of the smokesmith. This is my understanding of the magic system.
Yeah, yeah, no,
That was
that's
also kind
absolutely
of
right.
right. That was also kind of interesting. It's not something that okay, you smoke this particular herb and this is how it's going to work, but it's not like that. It depends on the person who is using what kind, how can they be manipulated, or so. I found that really fascinating. But for me, the most fascinating aspect of or the magical element where the creatures, right? The creatures that we get introduced to. So the blood sleuth and I don't know, Mars cruncher, something like
Yeah, the
that,
mark
right?
crunchers and the moss
Yeah,
bats. Yeah.
right. And I love the fact that you actually provided the illustration in the beginning of the book, that kind of helped us with the imagination a little bit. I like to read visually, like, to play out the scenes on my head. So those illustrations really helped me. So without giving any spoilers, because I think that they also have a history of how they came about, because they are not creatures that you usually see on Earth, right? So uh, how would you like to talk a little bit about your creatures?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've always felt that fantasy worlds. I've always kind of felt bothered by some fantasy worlds that are basically just like medieval England or like medieval China if you're in Asia, or like just basically when the authors just essentially copy and paste from our
Mhm.
world. And it was really refreshing for me to read the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson, mostly because he created this world from scratch. He basically created this entire world with, you know, unique creatures that he made up, and different
Mhm.
ecologies and different um, it's just completely alien worlds, right? And obviously, with Seeds of War, there's reasons why you have these alien-looking creatures in the world, and I think it made sense to have a reason for that. And like, I didn't want the characters to be riding horses and like, killing
Mhm.
chicken for dinner and things like that. It's like I wanted it to be something that's unique and kind of adds another element of fantasy to the story. Otherwise, it could have might as well just be historical fiction with
Mhm.
some bits of magic in it. And I really wanted it to be fantasy. Like I know that for a lot of grimdark books, they really kind of go low on fantasy. Like they don't really have a lot of magic. They don't really have a lot of like the kind of like the fantastic creature elements.
Mhm.
But for me, like that's also quite important as a fantasy reader. Like I like high magic. I like the high fantasy elements as well. So I guess the idea was to essentially do a crossover between the gritty side of fantasy with the epic and high magic side of the fantasy, like Brandon Sanderson types
Mm.
and things like that. So that was kind of my attempt at doing a crossover between the two sides.
God, that's fascinating because I really enjoyed reading about them, and I'm sure there is a lot more to be discovered about these creatures because we do get clues throughout the book. That you're trying to. There are breadcrumbs all over the book. I can see that. I'm so looking forward to reading about them more. So we have a comment from Joseph Francis Burton. He says, "My wife is from Philippines, and I like watching fantasy movies from there. Very different, lots of fantasy sea creatures." Yep. So, talking about creatures now. So we see them as these creatures right out of Jurassic World or something, right? They look really scary. And for me, what hit me is that those creatures were tameable. You could predict them, but not the humans of this world, right? Because so I think the humans were more deadly. And also feel that Gimlor, uh, when she took over this island, and she kind of runs kind of a charity for all these ex criminals to give them a second chance at life, and no leader, etc. For me, I'm coming back to the character side of this plot, um, Gimlor, because she is not a typical leader because she doesn't want to be a king, she does a queen, she doesn't want to be demanding, she doesn't want to rule over anybody. We keep that seeing repeated and repeated over again. And then, but still, when the conflict arises, she's there, in the forefront, fighting for these people who may not deserve what she is doing for them because most of them are not appreciative about what she is doing. So when you talk about this world is grimdark, I'm still a little bit doubtful and questioning because I see hope because what these people are always fighting, especially Gimlor and her gang. They are fighting for this set of people who are not redeemable, maybe, or they don't have any redeemable quality. They were ex-cons and ex-thieves, and they're still sometimes really rude to her, not thankful or grateful. So, but still they are fighting. So that's a positive side of humanity. So, um, is it really grim dark? Because I did feel that it is dark. Yeah, of course, but I still see hope.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really up to the reader to define it. I really don't like defining what it is because I've heard some people say, "Oh, it's very grim dark, it's very brutal," and but I've also seen people say, "Oh, actually, it's not that dark, and the characters are also not that bad. They're actually just trying to survive." So, I think it's
Mm-hmm.
really up to the interpretation of each reader.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say personally, I wouldn't really qualify it as grimdark,
Mm-hmm.
but just to kind of note on what you said, I would say that um, it's more epic fantasy. So it's like an epic world
Mm-hmm.
and like a vast world. But the for me, like grimdark is not necessarily the absence of hope, if that makes sense. I think
Okay.
I think grimdark is not necessarily just nihilism and like people accepting the inevitable. I think for me, grimdark is people fighting against the inevitable and people
Mhm.
fighting against what's you know taken as like something that's bound to happen, but still you fight it anyway because you have the tiniest sliver of hope, and I think for me that's much more empowering than seeing a story of good versus evil, because good versus evil, you know who's going to win already.
Mhm.
You know for a fact. You're just interested in seeing how the good guys are going to win and
Mhm.
what tactics they're going to use, and you're more interested in the ride and the journey. But for me, it's like when you have, instead of good versus evil, when you have people versus people, then it's not so clear cut. Like the
Mhm.
people have different degrees of morality and they have different ideas of what the world should look like, and you have conflicting viewpoints,
Mhm.
and people have different flaws, and sometimes when they grow in the wrong direction, or they grow in a way that's not necessarily a positive one. And I think that also ties with into the world, when even in a world that's not super grim dark, I find it empowering. Like I think it's the for people who have been through so much trauma like these characters have. I think it's empowering to see um, to see characters just basically surviving. I think survival sometimes is the best revenge. It's like
Mhm.
you're no one said you should survive. No one thought you'd be able to survive, and yet you did. It's I think it's just for me, like I find myself so empowered by stories like that. Even if the characters do very questionable things to achieve peace or to achieve their own goals, I still find those stories are the most interesting ones, and I think I wanted to write something that was
Mhm.
more along those lines.
Yeah, I think also there is, when you talk about this grimdark aspect, it's not just the people also, because towards the when we are nearing the end of the book, we do realize that there are higher entities at play here. There are some things that is not yet revealed to us, but it's more than just these characters. There is so much more, and things are getting more and more serious, right? And it kind of gave me a little bit of Malazan vibes in terms of who are getting involved. I mean, I can't say anything because of spoilers, but you know what I'm talking about, and people who have read the book will know what I'm talking about. So, in that way, I think that yeah, it's going to become more and more serious, and the stakes might be much higher, not just political intrigue and just a bunch of people fighting each other. There is more at stake. I think it's going to be right. So in that sense, I agree that it is definitely epic, but I did feel there are darker elements in this. But maybe even if it's not grim dark, it is definitely dark, and maybe it's going to get more and more, yeah, dark. So I have this
Yeah.
also. There's so many intriguing elements, right? Like the magic system itself is really kind of very it's apart than what we generally read, and then you have these creatures who are like out of the world, and then you have this political intrigue, and then some physical manifestation of other kind of magic system that we have not spoken about, maybe, or uh, some other kind of power that is infecting or infesting these humans, right? So that is also an intriguing part, and so there are so many aspects of the story still to be revealed, right? And I also find it very fascinating that there are some references to um, technologies, maybe, right? Because some of the paragraphs which I had highlighted, those have that. Because I don't want to give out any spoilers again, but so these are the intriguing elements, and there are many of them, plenty of them. So um, these are the things. Did you do those intentionally to keep the intrigue in mind, or did it organically happen while you were writing? Or was it intentional because of, or did you want to intentionally put these breadcrumbs so that the an attentive reader would pick it up?
I think it's a combination of all of the things you just mentioned. I think when I was doing my first draft, I thought it would be cool to have a plot line that kind of uncovers the mystery of this or the mystery of that. Because, like you, I tend to be quite mystery driven in my stories.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people think it's, oh, you're probably just a very character driven reader. Like, and I am. I really like compelling characters, but I also like a really well balanced story. So like if you give me a story that's just about character exploration with no plot, the only book that I've liked that was like that, it was The Blade itself by Joao F. If you give
Okay.
me other books that are basically just like character with no real plot or mysteries or things to discover as a reader, I'm probably not going to enjoy the book as much. So it was I wanted to write a book that was like that, like it was for my reading taste essentially. So it's like good characters, but I also wanted to have mysteries and things for the reader to pick up along the way, and kind of like leaving them breadcrumbs for them to pick up. And if they don't like that, if the mystery thing is not something that uh, is something that they like to follow, then that's fine. That doesn't detract from what the story is about. The story is not about the mysteries, but the mysteries
Mm-hmm.
are there, and I think they can be very rewarding for
Yeah.
the reader who pays attention to them. So I think again, like bringing it back, I think Brandon Sanderson really does a good job at doing this. Like he has,
Mm-hmm.
it's a very focused and very character-driven story, but he has these overarching mystery plots that he kind of solves and kind of puts in the story that really takes it to a level that keeps me engaged for massive books of like 1,000 pages. And I think if he was just doing character exploration for 1,000 pages, the books wouldn't work so well, and they wouldn't really sell the way that they do. They wouldn't be as popular. So I think it has like to be a good combination between um, plot, character, and other elements like of the world building, like magic and the creatures and things like that. And
Mm-hmm.
I was really concerned, even when I was writing the first draft, like of having a book that was balanced. Like everything needed to be balanced in a way that is something that I would like to read as a reader, not just as a writer, but like um, would I pick up this book, and would I enjoy reading this book? Because at the time when when I was writing it, I had no idea if it was going to be published or not, like if I was going to publish it or if it's just going to be for myself. And I think once I accepted that I mostly write for myself, and then hopefully, I'm a fantasy fan, so other fantasy fans might like the book as well. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I was mostly writing it for myself, and like I said before, like I'm quite driven by these plots, and I really want to figure out the mysteries, and like I want to guess what they are, and like sometimes I go back and reread bits just to make sure that I understood things right. And I really like that element of kind of like almost murder mystery kind of
Mm-hmm.
figuring
Yeah.
out something. And but I don't like to I don't like when those things kind of overshadow the characters and kind of the actions of the characters. So like I said, it's kind of like a parallel. Things have to move like alongside each other. Like the character development needs to take place exactly at the same time and at the same pace that these mystery plots take place.
Nice. So we have a comment from a viewer here. First destination. Oh, the idea of a smoke-based magic system. I'm really looking forward to reading more about this in the book. So
Oh,
yeah,
thank you.
you will really like it. I can promise that. So, mother's memories. So we get these epigraphs, right? Those are my favorite part. Another, I mean, there are so. If you come to think about it, there are so many favorites, favorite things in this book. So, how did you come about that? Because I do love when authors do that. I see. I'm also doing a read along of a book series by Janie Wirtz, Wars of Light and Shadow, and she at the end of the chapter always includes these three little paragraphs, and that could be related to the story that has happened or going to happen. So it's kind of adds to the whole flow of the story, right? And I really love a good epigraph. So how did you come about that? And would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Like I think for me it was like about to the epigraphs were a way to let the reader know that there's something kind of to be discovered, that I'm not just writing random stuff, that there is a mystery at play and something that's going to be kind of alluded to in the book, but it might be kind of outside of the character's understandings. So I wanted it to be uh, another thing for the characters to, sorry, not for the characters, for the readers to think about. I wanted to be like, I wanted them to look at it and be like, what is this? Will I
Mhm.
know? Will I know what this is? And if they have this expectation that something is going to be revealed, they're more likely to be engaged by the story. At least I am as a reader. Like when I see epigraphs, like I go completely bananas. So I kind of wanted to replicate this experience that I have with my own reading habits. And the way I came up with them was quite simple. Like you're just kind of like a stream of consciousness thoughts of I don't want to spoil, but like of someone, and I wanted them to be um, kind of not dangerous, but alluding to something that's dangerous and something that's kind of looming over everything. And I wanted to write them in a more kind of lyrical way, even though my writing is like
Mhm.
the complete opposite of lyricism, because I really like simple and to the point prose. But the epigraphs, I wanted them to be a little bit more elevated in terms of the lyricism and the prose.
Mhm.
So you can actually have a contrast between the epigraph being so kind of evocative, and then my writing is just quite straight to the point, I think.
Mhm.
Um, so the epigraphs were actually like I wrote them like if I put myself in the shoes of the character who's writing those things, and what would this character be experiencing in the circumstances that they're in, and what would they write about? Just kind of like what random thoughts would go through their mind,
Mhm.
and yeah, that's kind of how the epigraphs came about.
Yeah, they are really wonderful. Like I said, like you said, it's like very lyrical, poetic, and also, yeah, intriguing because there are so many. We are first of all, we are wondering who is writing this, right? And for what purpose is it? Somebody's book or diary or what is it, right? This is the question that runs throughout, and that mystery adds to the, yeah, intrigue of the whole story. So that's also very a nice touch that you've added. So I want to also ask about the relationship that some of these characters, for example, Orberesis and Solvi, right? So there is this God man or fake God man, and how he manipulates his followers, because at this point even the followers are like blindly following him and believing in his trust and all that, and it's a very strange dynamic that I find between them. But I think, um, growing up in India, living in India, where there is no dearth of godmen or godwomen, so I could definitely also relate to a lot of the things that you have written, right? So, uh, please tell me what did you? I mean, you already talked about religion and God, man, but again, what about the followers, or especially Solvi? How did you come about her character? Because she's
Yeah, I
another
think
secondary auxiliary character who is my favorite, even though she has her problems, but she is an interesting character.
yeah, I think she's someone that um, she is probably the least evil person in the book. I think from my perspective, I think she's just very she placed a very misguided faith into someone who's not the person she thinks he is.
Mm,
But and that kind of goes back to what you were saying about how you're kind of used to people being so fanatic in some ways about religion and things like that. And I think her character is my own way of dealing with people that I know from the way I was brought up as very Catholic upbringing, and I'm used to characters being um, religious, but not to that extent, or like
mhm,
the and it really goes back to people that I know. Like I know people who are even more fanatic than she is. Like they would like they're basically driven by fear and by kind of the pain, and they would do anything for for their god or for their religion. And I think it's quite striking because I've never seen that portrayed that well in fantasy. Like I guess the character that comes the closest to that I've read in the book is the what's the name of the monk in Da Vinci Code. I forgot what it's called, what he's called. But
No, I
there's a
forgot.
character anyway that he's a monk, and he's quite fanatic about
Hmm.
his religion, and he does
Right.
unspeakable things about just in the name of the religion. And I really wanted to show that side of fanaticism, and how sometimes the fanatic people are just people who are broken and they need help, but
Yeah.
they go to ask for help at the wrong people. Like they because they're broken and they're so eager to follow someone who is perceived to be a great person,
Mm-hmm.
they end up putting their entire trust in them. And
Hmm.
it's I think later in the books, later in the series, I think she's going to have a yes, Silas, exactly. Thank you so much. That's exactly who I was thinking about. And I think as the series goes on, like I'm going to pay a lot more attention to her character arc, and
Hmm.
I think she's going to have an interesting arc in terms of where she's going to go from where she is at the moment. But she is at the moment in Season 4. She's very much involved with things that she really believes are, um, her faith is very solid. But yeah, that's definitely something that she needs to figure out essentially.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about Solvi because in case if nobody else have mentioned her, I wanted to give her due here because I think that she is a very interesting character, along with another auxiliary character whom I really like, which is Carry On, and he is also very interesting. So, and I really appreciate when the auxiliary characters also have depth to them, not just the main characters, just be there to serve the purpose of the main character. So that's why I wanted to mention these two characters. Do you want to mention anybody else who I might have missed?
I also really like um, Edmure as a character. Um,
Hmm.
I think he was one of my favorite to write, even though he doesn't have a POV in the book. I really like him as a side character because he's a bit like Solvi. He's a bit of a kind of a broken man who puts his entire faith in someone.
Yeah.
And but he kind of does it in a different way. So he kind of he does it in a way that's a bit non-traditional. So like he puts his entire faith on a woman, and I think I kind of wanted it to be unexpected because a lot of fantasy has very kind of what I would call toxic masculinity in it,
Hmm.
about
Hmm.
how it's all about the male characters and there's basically no female characters, and it's all about how the women are just there to help out the men. And I really wanted to twist that trope on its head and do the opposite of that, where like a guy, he's quite damaged, and he's been through some really rough things in his life, and he basically put his entire trust and his entire faith in someone who's Gimler.
Right. Yeah, I actually forgot about him. Uh, so this book also is, I think, an entry into SPF B09, right? I mean, am I correct?
Yeah,
Right? And what
yeah,
can
yeah.
our
That's
viewers do to
correct.
help you out?
What's that? Sorry, I didn't catch the last part. Sorry.
I wanted to say, what can our viewers do to help you out there?
I think it's not really much that the readers can do in terms of the competition, because the competition, it has to do with the bloggers. So right now the book is being read by one of the 10 blogs that take part in the competition.
Kind
And
of the
so the
judges,
blogs
right?
will basically decide who the semifinalists would be. Sorry?
They are the judges, right? The selected ones,
Yeah,
these
so it's
bloggers.
it's
Mm.
10 blogs that act as the jury, and all 300 books will be judged. And so right now I'm with the Weatherwax Report. That's the blog that's supposed to read Seeds of War. And
Mm.
Yeah, it's just a matter of waiting. Like I'm not super expecting anything. I'm trying to lower the expectations.
Hmm.
But it's just a matter of being patient and just like accepting whatever comes along.
Okay. So I want to say this that, I generally do not read many of the self-published book, and I need to start. That's not intentional, but because I have agreed to so many buddy reads and read-alongs, and those are about these classic uh, books or popular books that have been pending since years. So I, just added them into my TBR. But I think this book really made me realize that okay, there is so much good stuff out there coming out from self-published books into new authors, and maybe I should mix up my TBR a little bit. And I think it's huge. It's a huge takeaway for me from this book was that that I got inspired to read more of self-published book, and that's why I don't know any of the other contestants or entries into the this contest. So this is yours is the only book that I have that I have read, and I have this book really made me realize that yes, of course I have to read the popular ones and the long pending ones in my TBR, but also make room for a little bit of self-published book as well. So thank you for that. So
You're
that's
welcome.
really yeah was eye opening for me. Uh, Finally, so we just reached 1 hour mark. I wanted to ask you that what what advice would you give to readers who potentially want to read your book, and what to expect, and what to look forward to in your book?
Yeah, I think we're
Did
back
we?
now.
Yeah. Yeah. You're back. Did you hear my question? Sorry.
I did not. I think it was something was frozen here, and I think I didn't really hear your question.
Okay, I'll repeat it. So I just want to ask you, what would you like to tell to our viewers or potential readers of your book, what to expect, what to look forward in the book? Because there are some aspects, like we discussed earlier in the book, that might not be appealing to everybody, right? So, without giving any spoilers out, just generally, if you want to inform potential readers who are looking forward to reading this book, what to expect.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is one of the things I said in the beginning. I think the first two chapters really set the tone for what you can expect in terms of grittiness and darkness. So if you're kind of okay with the level of characters being mischievous and kind of flawed and they're not necessarily great people, if you're okay with that, and if the first two chapters are not bothering you in any way, and if you feel quite excited by them and you feel like it's really good, then you should definitely continue. And if you think it's a bit too much, or you kind of prefer characters who are better people, and you kind of have to cheer through the character, really need to care about the character, then um, I'm not sure if the book might be for you, because I really focus on characters who are not necessarily likable people, or like you find your way in terms of liking them. I think at the end you kind of, or at least you understand them better, but um, they're most likely characters who will ruffle some feathers, or at least one of them will. Um, so I think, yeah, I think if you like gritty fantasy, I think would be my takeaway from this. If you like gritty fantasy, if you don't mind flawed characters, if you like kind of a looming sense of mystery over your fantasy books, and if you like the kind of epic scale of things with magic and creatures and a big map that kind of feels lived in but kind of unexplored at the same time, then I would definitely recommend you pick up Seeds of War. And yeah, I think if you like more self-contained stories, then Seeds of War might not be the one for you.
That's very well put. I think I agree with all of them, and I also want to add. I think it's about a story of. It almost feels like a story about real people trying to survive, uh, whatever adverse situation they are put in. Right. So that is also, I think, important theme throughout the book. I think considering all the three characters, no matter how gray or dark those characters are, they are trying their best to survive in the situations that they're put in. So overall, a beautiful, epic fantasy with lots of magic, deep characters, vast world, and all that. And we throughout the book get the feeling that the world is vast. It's much more vast than what's being revealed to us right now, and that makes us keep going. And there are, and as I said, for a lover of mystery like me, mystery thrillers like me, that aspect is also there in this book to look forward to. So I'm really, really, really looking forward to reading book two, and maybe before that I will have a reread of book one before the release of book two. So uh, thanks a lot, Joao, for joining us, and thanks for writing this wonderful book. Thanks all our viewers for joining. And if you have any questions, if you're watching this during, not during live, but later on, then if you have some question, maybe you can post in the comments, and yeah, Shao can answer them for you. So
Yeah,
thanks
absolutely.
again. Thanks everybody for watching.
Thank you
Bye
very much for
bye.
listening.
Bye everybody.